You are now listening to the Minority Trailblazer podcast. Season 2, new intro. Let the story begin.
One time for the lovers, 2 times for the ladies, 3 times for the brothers, 4 times for the babies. Do you love her? 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 1 time for the lovers, 2 times for the ladies, 3 times for the brothers, 4 times for the babies. Do you love her? 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 Brown skin, love her brown skin, love her brown. Brown skin, love her brown skin, love her brown. She my brown skin, love her brown skin, love her brown. She my brown skin, love her brown skin. Hold me down.
What's going on, world? It's your host, Greg E. Hill, the culture change agent. And man, I'm excited to be here on episode 34. I'm talking about we over 50,000 downloads in. Y'all showing a lot of love via Twitter, Facebook, everything. And I like to say, before I even get into the episode, thank you so much for your support. Thank you for your emails. I know my response time is horrible, but I'm working to do better. So thank you for your emails. For those that want to be on the show, that are recommending people to be on the show, you can email me at greg@gregehill.com. Thank you so much. I also like to say a few housekeeping things before I get into the podcast. One, I will be forming a small group to work on the show for season 3 because we're going to be making a lot of changes season 3. So I will be putting some feelers out there on my website, gregehill.com, or my Twitter or my Instagram, it's all Greggy Hill, to formulate a small team to work on the show improvements, get more audience engagement, our selection of guests, the whole 9. So if you're interested, please stay tuned. Probably the next episode, I'll be dropping more information on it. Second thing is, also, I am be switching the date of the Minority Trailblazer Summit. More details will be coming. I am also putting together a board for that. So look out for my website, on social media and whatnot for it. Boom. Third, leave a review, please. We are one of the top rated millennial podcasts for people of color in the whole country. Over 50,000 downloads, 100 different countries are listening, thanks to you. Not me, but thanks to you. But we still around 90 reviews online. So if you have been listening to this podcast faithfully, or even one episode, or even just now, you like the energy of the intro, please be sure to leave a review. I actually just uploaded a video online how to do it if you're on iTunes 4. So leave a review. Share with your friend, because I know everybody needs this kind of information and whatnot. And I look forward to you continue rocking with you on this journey as we head into season 3. We got like 8 episodes less of this, but as we head into season 3, as we embark on our first ever Minority Trailblazer Summit and all that good stuff. And thank you for all those that have supported the book. I appreciate it. We have tripled the sales of my second book, Remember Your Genius Again, One Man's Journey from Homeless to Hero to Humble. So I'm thank y'all for that. If anybody's listening in is interested in the book, you can go to gregehill.com/podcast book and you get a special discount for being a podcast listener. Matter of fact, this is what I'll do. For the first 5 people that screenshot themselves leaving a review on the podcast, I will send you a book free of charge. The book is normally $19.99, but the first 5 people to screenshot it and send me an email at greg@gregehill.com, I will give them a shout out live on air, and I will send them a personal signed copy of the book because I want to make sure I leave them reviews. All right, so that's enough of that, and I am excited about today because we have a game-changing interview from a game-changing guest, and I'm just going to get right into it. On this show, we interview young, successful minorities in a variety of fields to educate, empower, and inspire our current and future generation of leaders. And as y'all already know, I got a show for you today. I guarantee it's going to be a classic. I mean, as you've been following the podcast, we've had over 30 plus episodes interviewing comedians, activists, teachers, entrepreneurs, but we have never, ever had a president of university on the show, and today we are about to cross that line. So I'm gonna do a brief bio about this guest, and when I tell you, I probably could have read 5-10 pages and it still wouldn't be enough. So I'm gonna give y'all a little snippet, which is gonna be still long, but y'all just gotta hear this stuff. So our guest today currently serves as the president of Harris-Stowe State University, and at 39 is one of the youngest serving presidents in the country at any four-year institution. And he's only 39 years old, but he already brings 16 years of experience in higher education, working in 5 different school districts. And within 5 months, check this guy. Within 5 months of his arrival to Harris-Stowe State University, he raised over $1 million in student scholarships. Prior to his appointment as president of Harris-Stowe State University, he served as senior vice president of administration and student services at Bethune-Cookman University in Florida, overseeing a staff of over 170 individuals. His successes include oversight of the multi-million-dollar renovation of the institution's residence halls. And prior to Bethune-Cookman, he was associate dean of students at Rose College in Memphis, where he was oversight over student affairs, judicial affairs, student activities, Greek life, new student orientation, all of that. He's also held positions at Western Carolina and at Delta State University. So like I said, he's 39 and has been all across the country, Memphis, North Carolina, and now in St. Louis. He's received several awards for his work in higher education and in the community, and was most recently inducted into his alma mater's Hall of Fame, which is crazy. He has earned a bachelor's degree in education and a master's degree in sociology from Delta State University, and he has earned his doctorate in educational leadership with a specialization in higher education from Union University in Jackson, Tennessee. So without further ado, I would like to introduce the president of Harris-Stowe State University, Dr.Dwaun Warmack, to the Minority Trailblazer podcast. Welcome to the show.
Man, thank you so much, Greg. Thank you for having me on here, man. I'm excited to be here.
Man, I'm excited too, because I did my research, did my background. I'm like, yo, this podcast is gonna be one for the ages, just coming from where you come from. So, as we always do it, my show goes like this. We start off with the past, because everybody that we had in our podcast has been succeeded in a lot of different areas, have been doing amazing things. But we want to start before all the fame, before the press, before all that stuff. Start about you. Then we go into the present round. We talk about present day, what you do, and ask really questions about that. And then we talk about the future, because, as culture change agents, you have to visualize the future in order to get there. So as customary for all our guests, I love to start the show off with a quote. I wake up every morning at 4:30 in the morning. I run 5 miles and I send a quote to over 100 individuals. So I like to start off with a quote to get the motivational ball rolling. So President Warmack, could you share with our audience a quote and a story on how you apply that quote to your everyday life?
Oh yeah, thank you again, Greg, for having me on here, man. Let me say this, and I guess the quote for me would be: "People see the glory, but don't know the story." And so, you read the bio on paper, and all of those things sound amazing, man. And so I may have to take you on the road with me one day, to give me the introduction, make me sound like I'm really somebody in the future. But no, on a serious note, the quote would be: "People see the glory, but don't know the story." And I say that, man, I've been very blessed in my career to be, when I was selected 2 years ago as the president, I was the youngest president in the country. And, coming from my humble background, man, I just said, no, it can't be nothing but God. So the bio reads well, but what it doesn't tell is how it all started. I'm born and raised in Detroit, Michigan, and I'm first generation college student at its core. So for me, I didn't think college was even an option, and to be now a president of a university is supernatural. And so I think of when I say first generation, my mom raised 5 of us in the most impoverished area of Detroit, 5 boys, and I have one little brother now who's serving a 43-year sentence in the penitentiary, another little brother who had multiple run-ins. My mom had a GED. None of my oldest brother had a high school diploma, but no one had ever gone to college. All the rest of my brothers didn't have any, a high school diploma and have GEDs. And so I'm the middle. So it wasn't that I was just that intellectually inclined. It wasn't that I wasn't just that smart, but, God had a different plan for me. But it wasn't always that way, and we'll probably get into this more in a minute, but I was, I finished high school with a 1.2 7 GPA, and not that I wasn't intellectually inclined, because I was at school every day. I spent a significant amount of time doing all the things I shouldn't have been doing, and so then, going through high school, having a chance to see a guidance counselor, never, because I was told, I'm a Warmack. So at the end of the day, you're not college material. You'll be just like the remainder members of your family. And so God had a different plan. So, but looking on the bio, reading that paper, you'll never know that, so.
Wow, man. Wow. So you already done segued into our first round. We talk about the past. So just to dive and jump right in, what do you think changed, or what was significant and special outside, of course, God's will in your life, that you as the middle child, being that your mother just got a high school, she received a GED, right?
She had a GED. Yep.
She had a GED. Your family didn't have a history of college. So what changed, or what jumped out in your life to kind of have you go a different direction?
Well, I think it's the power, once again, like I said, God, but I think it's, and then, I didn't grow up with a strong religious faith. So I say these things now, knowing that it couldn't have been me, and so growing up, I would say a couple of things that were main factors. I was fortunate to be a student athlete, so that kept me away in a lot of ways. I was a pretty decent athlete, but there was also a couple people who believed in me in a way that I didn't believe in myself. So when I graduated, I had no college offers. So I was actually on the block, man, and one of my coaches pulled up next to me and said, "You're better than this, and I want you to come play in this tournament with me." And I'm a sore loser. I'm a competitor. And so played in the tournament, and it was a coach that came to recruit me and said, "Hey, I'd love you to come play at my community college. And if you can come play at my community college." And so I get there, and then this is where the light came on. Not that I wasn't smart, when I got to the community college, I said to the coach, I went to sort of all black high schools, K through 12. So this my community college was all white, and I sat in a classroom where my first day of class, it was only 2 African Americans in this philosophy course, and the guy got to my last name, which is Warmack, and said, "Hey, Warmack." I'm like, "Oh, he know my name already."
Yeah.
He's like, "You must be one of those student athletes. You won't be here after the first 3 weeks of class." Ooh. And so at that point, the light came on, and so I pushed and persevered, and sat in the front of the class, got an A, but then again, because I got an A, he said I cheated, so I had to take the next test in front of the dean, and the second test again in front of the dean. But I finished my first semester of college in my first time in my life with a 3.4 GPA, and never looked back, because I was challenged in a way by somebody who didn't look like me, who didn't think I was capable, because I was a student athlete. But I always had the intellectual capacity, but I channeled it in the wrong way.
Wow. So what sport was this?
I played football and basketball in college.
Oh, wow. And that was at Delta State. At Delta State,
So at Schoolcraft College is where I went to junior college.
Ah, okay.
I played basketball there. So I was a junior college first team, all conference, all regional team, so I was highly sought after. So I finished there and went to Delta State and played at Delta State in Division II, Elite Eight, was captain. We won a lot of games,
So knowing what you know now, like with all your experience, your wealth of knowledge, what would you go back and tell a younger version of yourself?
Well, I think I think that's what I spend a lot of time doing now on my, personal time, mentoring. And that's why I decided to serve, and I'll maybe get to this later as well, at a place like Harris-Stowe State University, because as a historically black college, but it's also to our mission, provides access and opportunities for people like me that, I may not have the best GPAs, best things starting off, but it was given a chance. And then I was able to succeed. And so for me, it's tough to tell somebody that's 14, 15, 16 that you should do this, you should do that. But they're a product of the environment. All they know is what they see. And so we don't know what we don't know. So what I try to do is be a beacon of light and say, hey, I've lived it. I know what it's like to flip a nickel to a dime to a quarter to a half, how to make the work. And so when I share the real narrative, they're like, wow, this brother ain't just talking. He's lived it. And so what I'm able to say is them. So let me help you not make mistakes that I had to make that allowed me to be where I'm at today. And so those are the type of dialogue I'm able to go back and reach. So I spend a significant amount of time in, urban communities where challenges are happening.
And another question before we kind of get to the money round of as far as talking about Harris-Stowe, talking about HBCUs and everything else, what led you down the journey into higher education? Like, when did you find out that was your calling, and what happened? What year was that?
Right, and that's interesting. So I went to Delta State, which is in Cleveland, Mississippi. No family below the Macy-Dixon line. So I caught a Greyhound bus. I had $25, and that was it, And so I got there and was, like I said, I was an athlete, and so I had a great experience. But I was perceived as a leader, so I became very active on campus. I became a member of student government. I became an RA, became a leader in my fraternity, And so all these things that I would have never channeled my energy to growing up in Detroit. When I get into Mississippi, I was able to get engaged and also speak out on quite a few injustices that were there. Not being from the Mississippi Delta region, a lot of things that I thought were not, I guess, ethically or morally right. I had a different worldview, so I was able to speak out. So became a very strong student advocate and activist. And so through my time on student government, and when I graduated and walked across the stage, my president said, "We're not letting you go back to Detroit. And I think you can have the potential to be a college president one day." And I said to him, "If I have to do anything you're doing, I don't want that job." And so, I was engaged. The president, I tell people, they knew me because I spent a lot of time in there challenging the social norms, if that makes sense. So if there was racial injustice, if there was issues around any student complaint, I was the one that would go have the conversation with the administration and talk about how do we come up with solutions. And so I think I had no clue. I did it all as a student leader. Like I said, RA, leader in the fraternity, leader in everything on campus, captain of the basketball team, so that, I was engaged in the student life area. Well, my first job out, my president hired me as a coordinator of student life. And so I began doing everything that I was doing as an undergrad, but I found out I can get paid for it. And so, it became a career that I fell in love with, and so was fortunate to work hard. I would say all the time I talked about the academic performance, but I also, anyone who knows me knows that I would just never be outworked. I was 5'0" nothing, but captain of one of the best basketball teams in our school history. Competed on all levels, and I applied that athletic experience to my work. I may not have been the smartest. I may not be. Like I said, 17 years later now, I'm a college president. So
wow, that's crazy. And our last question of the past round, till we get into the present day, is from your journey from growing up Detroit, Michigan, and poverty, having all these siblings, not really having too many role models. What is the one thing from that journey that if you utilize as a strength for your success today?
I think it's when you come from that background, you learn how to survive. You survive in any condition, you survive. And so I tell people all the time, if I can survive that, I can survive anything. And the second piece is what I failed to mention earlier. These things you can't do alone. And I was blessed to have which I call a guardian angel, my brother by the name of Rodney Deal, who poured in me once again and saw something I didn't see in myself. So when I'm at junior college, it's an hour away from Detroit, I didn't have a car. So we had an apartment. So this guy gave me his car to drive. He would catch the bus in the winter to work, would allow me to drive the car to school all week. He would fill it up with gas because he saw something in me. And so when I think about it, I don't ever believe in giving back. I believe in paying it forward, And so through all of that, and he's been with me still, who I consider a mentor, a father figure to this day, has never asked for anything back. And so I always said, "Man, what do I owe you?" And his thing was always help the next person. And so I think, for me was just understanding, not allowing myself to be a product of the environment, but also never forgetting where I come from. That keeps me hungry and grinding, because when you come from that environment, that it's if you survive there, as I mentioned earlier, you have this sort of ideology of, I can't go back to that, and I need to work my tail off to ensure that I never go back.
Yeah. So what is it like when you go back now to Detroit, Michigan, maybe go on some of the blocks you used to be on, or see the people you used to work with? How does that, how often you go back, and how is it?
I go back a lot, man. Unfortunately, I lost my mom about 2 years ago. And so that was, really my staple. All of my brothers and everybody are still there. And I say this in the most humble way, man. I think because of me being my authentic self, man, I still have a ton of hood cred, so I go back and it's nothing but love because, the narrative is, if B can make it out, anybody can, and so I'm not one of those that, I'm this president, I'm go back, I'm the same person, man. I'm not preaching to people, but I'm just trying to say, hey, here, let me be a beacon of light, so, and if I can be example to the young G's in the hood, to the folks that are there, that's good. I mean, and my mom never wanted to leave the hood. So anytime, you go back, she still was planted there. And my brothers are still in the same neighborhood in the community. So it's love, man. And my thing is, and it's celebrated, like, because of, me being in my authentic self. But the flip side is, I think for me, understanding that culture and that environment. So I go back to the neighborhood and really try to be that light. But then, and for me, is I've spoke at, like this past year, I spoke at 3 high school graduations in Detroit, so to be able to share. Sometimes we don't see people that look like us, that come from where we come from, and see that success, because I never saw, when I see a brother in a suit or something, they were coming to speak about something they didn't grow up in my community or my neighborhood, so they didn't really know my struggles. So for me to be able to say, here, I'm from right here on Mack and Bewick, born and raised, and so that light comes on, like, wow, he from the gutter, and so, but then to be able to talk about, being, focus and the power of education and all of those things. So it brings a different set of value, because I'm from there. So.
Got you, man. So that was a perfect pass round. So now let's segue into present day. But I want to talk about before Harris-Stowe University, Harris-Stowe State University, because looking at your background and your bio, a lot of these positions that you've held, you've predominantly been some of the youngest person at these leadership positions and whatnot. And also a thing that a lot of times on podcasts and whatnot, and I'm glad you alluded to it earlier, we don't highlight some of the biggest sacrifices that people have to make in their career. So I want you to speak on your 1 and 2 biggest sacrifices you had to make early on in your career in order to kind of set the paveway to now being one of the youngest presidents in all the country.
Well, that's a great question. I think it's probably 2. For me, the sacrifice was because I, was trying to be a trailblazer to change generations. For me, it was that, if you think about grandmother and all of her children, 8 children, then my mother and all of, so, and not having that. So I wanted to be that beacon of light for all of my nieces, nephews, children coming after me, to see the importance and power of education. So I felt like I had to do it for generations. And so the sacrifice was I had to not do some things that other folks were doing, to ensure that those happen. But it's also, too, from a professional standpoint, I became very clear. Sometimes I would have to go to the wilderness to get to where I need to go. And so being from urban core from Detroit to go to Cleveland, Mississippi, my brother, it was a culture shock. Shock, man. And so, but after that, when I'm granted the opportunity, I'm 25, and you're right, I was the youngest in every position. So when I became the director of multicultural, I was the youngest director in the state of North Carolina of a large, state school unit. So I was 25 years old then. And so people are like, you about to go to Cullowhee, North Carolina? Where is that even on the map? And so, but for me, I knew I had to sacrifice to get what I wanted, so if I knew I wanted to advance and be a college president, well, I had to go where other places where other folks wouldn't go. And so that for me, I was willing to do that and do the work that no one else wanted to do to get to where I wanted to go. And what that meant was sacrificing family, sacrificing personal relationships, because my focus was on my grind and not anything else. So I just couldn't allow myself to get distracted from that work. So willing to go to the wilderness and also to compromise time with, developing and building a family and things like that as well.
Oh, man. So with that being said, though, because I know you're in these positions, you're the youngest on it, and you probably have, especially in the university system, because it's not like in corporate America or even entrepreneurship where you're young, but you got all the revenue, so you can call shots and whatnot. You're in these institutions that maybe have faculty that's been serving there for 10, 20 years. You have staff that's been there 10 to 20 years, and you come from your background, an African-American man at 25 being a leader. What were some of the challenges? How'd you overcome some of those challenges early on with maybe you being maybe the youngest on the totem pole, but having director-like responsibility?
Well, that's a great question. I think so. For me, the big piece was, and I think it wasn't until probably about 4 years ago, Greg, I would be open to share my story because I was so fearful and embarrassed of being not what mainstream society thinks that one should be, right? So then at that time, here it was, I was this young brother, bachelor's, master's degree at 21, 22. He's just intellectually inclined. He was a leader. And so I rode that till the wheels fell off because I was embarrassed to really share really who I was. And so I went in having to prove that, you think of a larger school like that, like I said, being the youngest and the director, people questioning, why is he even here, first off? But then secondly, does he have the core competencies or the skill sets to do the job? And so for me, those were two pieces that I always felt that intellectually I would be able to hold my own. But then secondly, no one was going to outwork me. So it would start off like, needing other folks to validate what I said. But then after 4 or 5 months in the job, it was like, this young brother knows he knows what he's doing, right? And so then I became the person that folks were referring to. But I was fortunate in every one of these jobs. I had amazing mentors, and so I worked for supervisors who were not intimidated by my youth, but who also celebrated to help me elevate to go to the next level. So my supervisor, Jane Adams Dumford, who's at Western Carolina, took a chance of hiring me young where other folks wouldn't have taken that chance. And for her, it was an opportunity for her not to allow her ego to get involved, but to say, let me mentor this young brother and help him get to where he needs to be. And so that she did. So she had been assistant vice president there, had a voice. And so she was a voice for me when I didn't have a voice, and also helped me understand how the temperament was important, not to fight some battles. Some battles wasn't worth fighting, and not having to validate all the time of who I was. The work would speak for itself. And so having those mentors there to do that. And so when I did that, like she knew that, once again, I was going to be the first one there and the last one to leave, and put the work in to not disappoint her. Well, after a couple of years, I was promoted there. And so promoted to another higher senior level position, larger responsibilities. And that's how it was.
Oh man, that's crazy, man. And what is your take on authenticity and why it matters so much?
Right. I mean, that's a amazing question, Greg. I think, as I said before, early in my career, I would not be my authentic self. I wanted to be what I thought higher education and academy thought I should be. And so a person with my background, just historically, was not supposed to be in the leadership roles that I was in. So I operated out of fear if I shared that. So, but then again, I became very clear about when I began to grow personally and spiritually about going to a place where I can serve and be my authentic self, right? And so I've become very clear about who I am and whose I am. And I will not go serve, because this is, for me, I've learned, like, I wasn't called to the pulpit, I have a cussing spirit, so that wouldn't be me. I have, I still have, I'm a work in progress, but I do know what, I think people get it conflicted, where I do know my ministry is to serve the underserved, underrepresented population. So when I became clear about that, I could not show my authentic self and say this was my ministry, because then I would miss who I'm called to serve. So my story and my testimony allows them to see something in me that they may see in themselves. And so aligning that, my passion and my compassion had to align. So for me, I won't go to a place where I can't be my authentic self. So if I can't, like I said, I joked with you earlier, I have on True Religion jeans, Air Force Ones, and a Harris-Stowe t-shirt today. And so but that's me. And so I explained that to the board and to everyone else. I'm going to give you, but I also know when it's time to put my uniform on as well. Something we talk about, I think sometimes in our urban communities, and said on your podcast, based on your listenership, if you have younger folks, some of our, in our hoods, it's called code shifting. We have to be able to code shift, and so I know when it's time, if I'm going out to cultivate a relationship with a multi-million-dollar donor, I'm going suited and booted, because I know that's the time for that. But my main constituent base are my students. So I had to connect with them where they are. Mm-hmm. So I need to be at a place. So if I was working at a different type of institution, maybe I couldn't be this. So that's why I'm clear about where I go and serve. As stated earlier, at this institution, I'm able to serve the people who I think, the student population who I think I'm called to serve from a ministry perspective, and I can do it as my authentic self and be that. And so, and that's what I've, chosen to do in life. I think it's at a point where God has blessed me abundantly, with work. I'm by far not rich by no stretch, but I've earned more money than any I can ever imagine in my life. My goal was to, become a coach and, make $40,000, what I'm saying? And so God has superseded that in ways. So, for me is I'm unwilling to compromise who I am for the sake of, for anything really, so I understand that, but within that context, being able to know that I represent this university at all time, that this is an institution that I have to be able to ensure that the brand is protected. So I would never do anything to destroy the brand. And so often you may hear on some of these things, I'm speaking from the views of Dwaun Warmack, not the president of Harris-Stowe State University. I think it's so understanding, contextually where and when to be able to do that. So and once again, it's not something easy. I didn't really become into this space until I was in my, early 30s. I'm like, God, enough of the faking. I gotta, my people are hurting, and so put me in a place where I can serve my people and be my authentic self. And that real transformation happened at Bethune. I was able to go there and, and be in some ways free. And and be authentically who I. And so at this point, when people come after me now for jobs, I'm like, you sure you want this? This is this, and so I, but I say that, and from a competency perspective, from a research perspective, from understanding best practices in higher education, I'm cool with that. So I've gone to Harvard program. I've gone to ask. So I'm put me in the room with President Obama. I'll use superfluous terms to define the level of intellect. You put me in the hood with Lil Ray Ray and Jaja. I'm able to understand that when they're talking about that work, cutting the bricks and understanding that. So I thank God for allowing me to be in a position to be able to reach multiple audiences to ensure that the work is done.
Being a chameleon. So let's get to the nitty gritty stuff. Okay. Because right now, HBCUs, they're facing a variety of different challenges like enrollment decline, high turnover, state and federal funding changes. So upon accepting this position at Harris-Stowe State University, can you share with our audience some of the unique challenges you faced upon your arrival and how you overcame them?
That's a great question. So, Greg, we in higher education, we have this thing called IPADS data. And so it's a federal government way of calculating data related to institutions. So you can go and find any information regarding school enrollment and school graduation rates on iPad. And so when this search firm approached me about this position, first off, I was living in Daytona Beach, Florida, living in LPGA, wife and a 2-year-old daughter at that time.
Oh, wow.
I'm like, now we're living a good life in Florida. I'm loving my institution. Uh-huh. Why would I go to St. Louis, Missouri? It snows there. My Midwest life is over. I've been a Southern boy since I went on, my Southern tour. And so I was like, no, I'm not interested. And I began to look at some of the data. And I'm like, wow, man, this place is in some trouble. They've dropped in enrollment, 14 years straight. They've had budget shortfalls. They've, had to lay off staff members. Man, this is
cold bread.
Right. I'm like, I'm not going to touch this. And so, I was talking to my president, who was a mentor. So I told the search firm no twice. And then finally was like, just explore it. You don't ever know, you've never applied for presidency, do it for the experience. And I'm like, well, Doc, I'm not interested in St. Louis. So I actually go for the interview and I come to campus and I fall in love. And I fall in love with the students because I saw and I was able to have conversation and dialogue. And the students were really, from my humble view, lacking some of the leadership characteristics that that I had. And so the challenges were real. I said, man, God, is this really where you want me to come and serve?
Mm-hmm.
And so, I think it's, when like I said, we had dropped in enrollment, 15 years straight, 14 years straight. We had, struggled with some of our academic programs. There was 12 degree programs. So for me, we were able to come in with a very clear vision. So in our first year, we had, was able to increase our degree programs by, about 108%. We went from 12 degree programs to about 41 majors and minors,
Wow.
all have to be approved by the state. We had record enrollment my first year here. We grew by 24.4%, while other institutions were struggling, to our first year enrollment in 8.6% overall enrollment based on intentional enrollment management strategic strategy our team we put in place.
Mm-hmm.
Then, we're projecting a substantial increase this year in our enrollment, filling our residence halls. And so that made we be able to build a value proposition. So I was able to go out then and solicit support from major donors to help me bring in the top quality students. And so you mentioned earlier, because of I come from student affairs. I'm a student-centered president, student-centered, student-focused, student-driven. I believe in hearing what they need and what they want.
Mm-hmm.
So I do, and I hate to give away my strategy because then other folks' numbers. But I am on the road recruiting. I am at the fairs because I want the parents to know that they have access to me, and so I'm on social media. Students know they can find me on Instagram, on Twitter. Parents know this is you email me directly. I don't have the status quo position, prompt and circumstance. I check my own emails, and so so for me, I operate it as my authentic self, and for that, people maybe can see that,
Mm-hmm.
and so I'm able to go out to these school systems, school districts, speak at these graduations, and speak truth into the present, and that allows them to say, okay, well, maybe this is where I want to send my kid. And then, so we're at a place, just to give numbers for you. We, as you mentioned, some of our HBCUs are struggling, and so we have to have, think about doing some things differently. So when I arrived, we had a total of 1,500 applications for the entire year. That was our second highest applications in school history. Well, after my first year, last year we had about 3,500 applications. So we,
wow.
Double those. But right now we're up to about 4,900 applications at this point, and we're only going to yield a class of 600.
Mm-hmm.
So when we're going to at a place where people were not coming third, fourth choice to, this is a top choice for people right now.
Mm-hmm.
So we've been intentional. We came in with a very intentional strategy, and so when we created this 4 pillars of excellence, and so we operate and lead off this right now from our strategic plan. We call it our excellence agenda, excellence in academics, and so we want to be excellent there. So we've grown our degree programs. First time in 159-year history, we got legislation passed last year to offer master's degrees.
Mm-hmm.
So that will be, once again, game changing for this region. There's about 2.5 million residents in the greater St. Louis region.
Wow.
But there's about 577,000 who are African American, but there's about 370,000 who are 18 or over, which gets problematic is only 14% of those have a bachelor's degree. So that's 85% of the African American population in this St. Louis region have a bachelor's degree. But what was more alarming when I arrived, I was able to see less than, or 95% of the African American population didn't have a master's degree. And so, but there's only one institution in this region whose mission mandated by the state and the federal government to serve that population. So I thought it was sort of absurd that we couldn't offer masters, but 95% of the African American population didn't have a master's. And so that strategy we employed, and we're excited the legislature passed Senate Bill 334, which allows us to offer graduate programs for, the first time in school history.
Wow, that is phenomenal. That is phenomenal. That's phenomenal. And what would be the number one thing that Harris-Stowe State University has been able to kind of differentiate themselves and grow outside of hiring you?
Right. I think we're trying to change the narrative. Unfortunately, which I think a lot of our HBCUs, the mindset was, we're here, they will come. But unfortunately, if you've seen over the past 30 years, a lot of our mainstream institutions have provided, access to the underrepresented minority population and have these amenities that our students are able to go. And so a lot of our HBCUs were founded, early 1900s. And so our facilities, our physical plant, our landscape, are sometimes older because we just don't have the resources that other institutions have. Mm-hmm. And so what we've been able to do is try to be intentional of build our value proposition, and so how do we, it's us, they're cheating us as an HBCU, but to say, if you don't support us, this is what happens. And so I could have gone and say, because of the only historically Black college, you are, violating our rights to not have, master's degrees. Or I can say, hey, if you provide me an opportunity to offer master's degrees, here's how we can change the economic climate here in the greater St. Louis region. More educated African Americans makes a better workforce, better taxpayers, better tax base, and let us be the catalyst to help provide this educational opportunity that will change our economic landscape. So changing the narrative, and so not all the time saying, they're not doing this for HBCUs. So how do we build our value proposition? And so what is, like, corporations, what is their return on their investment? Mm-hmm. So right now, I'll give an example. I'm going to every corporation here to say, I'm willing to produce the most outstanding minority graduates that can be excellent, employable as soon as they graduate from me. If you have X amount of dollars that you spend on recruiting and diversity initiatives, you don't have to leave St. Louis. I will provide you the best business administration graduates. I will provide you the best criminal justice graduates. Tell me how many you need. We'll provide that for you. So how do you, so changing the strategy, understanding that, we have to take our value proposition to them to be able to ensure that we have something to bring to the table.
I think that's really important, just in general with anything if you're trying to make changes or grow. Don't say, woe is me, but go in and think, okay, what really value am I adding? And I'm glad that y'all have took that approach. And I know you speak about it's a lot of community facing, community focused initiatives y'all doing. So could you speak on the role that your institution plays within their community of St. Louis?
Right. So I was fortunate to come behind a president that was here 32 years.
Oh, wow.
Who had built he arrived, it was one building, one major, and he was able to build it, and so had a really strong community tie. So I was able to inherit that notion of strong community relations. And so, but from a practical perspective, I started here July the 1st, 2014. And my introduction to the state of Missouri 1 month later was August 9th, Mike Brown tragedy. And so that was my introduction. So this is my first presidency. I'm opening up a school. We're 13 miles from the Ferguson area, and not just 13 miles. At that point, about 45% of my students were from that community. And so, it began to impact us in a different way. And so I called a meeting the day it happened. I said, so as the only historically Black college in this area, in this region, Lincoln is here as well, but a couple hours away. And so as only HBCU in this region, it's important that we have a civic and a moral responsibility to be a solution base for this tragedy. Mm-hmm. And so I announced immediately that we will serve as the intellectual think tank to help the community heal. So from every major town hall, from every community event, we hosted it on our campus. Wow. We became the voice for the unvoiced, and so we allowed a platform from the former chief of police, to ground zero protesters, to be at a place to have those conversations. But for me, that wasn't enough. And so we created that piece there. So I challenged our institution to think differently about our civic and moral responsibility as a historically Black college. But then secondly, how do we get wrong? We want to focus on how do we help stop this violence and how do we help this community heal at this time? So when I arrived in July, I remember reading an article that talked about these felon school districts in St. Louis. Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, unfortunately, the Ferguson-Florissant school district where the Mike Brown tragedy happened was listed as one of those felon school districts. So what we didn't see with the mainstream media, what we didn't see is one of the most challenged school districts in the state, because of this unrest, missed 2 weeks of instruction.
Oh, wow.
So how can we systemically say we want to move this needle where the students, the kids that need it to most in this underrepresented, underserved community miss 2 weeks of instruction, and they're already listed as one of the failing school districts. So for me, I thought that was a huge problem. I fundamentally believe education is the key and the answer. I'm a living witness. So I said that what we're going to do, we're going to go adopt two of the elementary schools. So we went out, we had started a very strong African-American male program, which we sent 50 black males. The first day of school was the day of Mike Brown's funeral. So instead of going out chasing the cameras, we decided to go to the school systems to welcome all of the kids back to school. So we wore shirts. On our shirts, all of our 50 black males, it was our first day of school. So instead of going to class, I allowed them to go join me to go out to welcome these elementary school kids. And on our shirts, it said, I am ... And so all this time, everybody would have thought, oh, Mike Brown. And for me, on the back, it said a Harris-Stowe African-American male scholar. Okay. And so for changing the image of the mainstream media. So here you have 50 young black males, students from Harris-Stowe, standing at the door before they even can walk in the door. They build a warm-up line. So for every kid that got off that bus, every parent that dropped them off, we high five and we hugging them, saying, welcome back to school. We're excited about you being back. And these parents are crying because this hadn't been an image they had been seeing. And so the kids are crying. So from that, the principal's like, we need y'all out here every day, And so we're like, well, from a scale perspective, we can't do this every day. So what we did is adopt it. So we sent about 50 black males out to those schools to read, mentor, to help them work with their literacy on a regular basis. And so really, that's our community. And so, but now, now every school wants us out there. So we can't, we don't have that many males to go out and do it, but we're intentional about, how do we be the change agents that we want to see? So like now, part of what we're having tough conversations now around what do we do with all the things that are happening in this world.
Yeah. So in light of that, in the wake of the recent tragedies and whatnot, like what is your university's take on like student activism?
Well, I fundamentally believe in, student activism. A couple of things in academy, you'll hear about, academic freedom for faculty. Okay. And so I believe in that. And so same way I believe in student activism for students. Right. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's when we talk about shared governance in higher education, that means valuing the opinion of all of your stakeholders, students, faculty, and staff. And so I was a student activist in a major way, and so I get the importance of it. So what we do is before activism, I think it's leadership training, leadership development has to happen. So that's infused in every single thing we do, and not just from an activist perspective, but how do we train future leaders? And so as we training and developing them, we encourage our students to take a stand and have a voice for what they want to have a voice for, and so not trying to muffle, not trying to discourage them, and being able to empower them to make sound decisions related to whatever that passion may be. So if it's activism around unjust issues with policing, let your voice be heard, but let your voice be heard in a meaningful way that strategy allows you to get the outcome that you want. And so prime example. So the day of the verdict, for Mike Brown, everyone was waiting by the TVs, and you had all of the unrest. So the students decided to host a watch party to watch it. And this was they decided to do. And so at this point, I must admit, I'm slightly nervous because you don't know where it's going to go. Mm-hmm. And in the watch party, so it comes back, it decided not to prosecute and indict him. Well, people hit the roof in this city. Our students made the conscious effort after, some of them had been out protesting before and all of that, made the conscious effort. I look outside my window, I see 150, 200 students circling our quad, holding hands to pray. Wow. Conscious choice for them, right? They could have done a variety of other different things, but that's what they decided to do. And so powerful. So I walked out to join them, and I asked her, so I said, so why this? And one of our student leaders, who's actually now our current SGA president, said, if we don't do this, who will? And so I think it's, and the same students that were out there, marching, protesting before, but that's a conscious effort that they decided to do, and that's their choice.
Oh, wow, man. That's That's powerful. So before I kind of switch to the future round, first I'd like to say thank you for your efforts and thank y'all. I mean, thank you for your students for their efforts, man. That is a testimony itself, because I remember around that time people were looting. There was a lot going on. So to have those individuals take their own right, take their own stand, that's huge. That you have a university that encourages that and that allows that to take place.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed.
So we're getting to our last round. We're just talking about the future. And I just got a couple questions for you. With your success thus far at Harris-Stowe State University, what does the vision look like? Do you want to have rapid growth, or do you want to kind of continue to be a smaller college campus? Like, what's the future hold for Harris-Stowe State University?
Well, I think a couple of things. I think we do have a growth strategy that's in place, but it's also too, I value the small, intimate environment. And so we want to grow. We want to strategically grow, so we're, with our enrollment management plan, we're clear about, we don't want to be over 5,000 students. We want to be small enough, intimate enough where I can walk across campus, high five, get dapped to my students and have conversations, and I know them and they know me, and our faculty keep our classroom space small to be able to do that. But we also want to grow our online base, and so how do we increase our presence from a global perspective, where it's not an infrastructure need or to growth, that we be able to provide a Harris-Stowe education globally. And so our growth strategy will be multi-tier, multi-pronged from that. But we have no aspirations to be a large research school. We have no aspirations to be, a super mega institution. We understand in our niche and want to do what we do well, exceptional.
I love that. And what do you think what is your take on the future of higher education and HBCUs in general?
Well, I think I will say this, and I talked about our success, but I will go on the record to say I believe our HBCUs are under attack, and if we're not careful, and there's folks that will argue and say we live in a post-racial society, there's no longer a need for historically Black colleges, and I would say that's probably one of the most absurd statements that I hear. I said, so there's only about 3,500 college universities across the country, and it's only about 100 of us HBCUs. And so when you talk about not a need, how many times do you ever hear there's not a need for, no longer a need for a predominantly white institution? How many times do you hear there's no longer a need for a Jesuit institution? How many times do you hear there's no longer a need for all female school? So why do you think, we don't need an HBCU? We all have unique missions. We all have unique partners. So there is a need. And I don't know how post-racial society it is, considering everything that's happening in the country right now. But I think there's an intentional and a strategic attack when you look at the funding that's happening to our HBCUs, some of the things that, so we just have to be conscious and woke and stay woke, and be mindful of those things. And hopefully our alumni base and our strong constituents will support our institutions. What happens is our alumni giving rate is so low. And what we need to understand is sometimes it's not about the amount we give, but it's just about giving, and it may not be money, it's time, effort. I explained to someone the other day, I worked at this one institution, what made that institute, it was small school, but large endowment. What made it so great was their alumni. They made sure that people graduating after them were placed in internships. They made sure if they were in corporations, they were getting jobs for those kids. So we just need to, our HBCU alumni base, no matter what HBCU attended, it's a small community. And so how do we stay unified enough and together enough to support each other to be successful? And I think that's happening on a large scale. There's a group of us, I don't want to make sure I want to use the right word, presidents that who convene on a regular basis. It's I don't want to make this an ageism deal, but it's most presidents under 50 at HBCUs, and we meet on a regular basis, like twice a year, and we talk about some of these challenges and what do we do to be unified. So it's not a competition, So I'll use Lincoln University down in Missouri, which is our sister institution. We're only 2 HBCUs in the state of Missouri. So if a student comes and say, hey, not a good fit for me at Harris-Stowe, I am not ashamed to say, hey, there's another amazing HBCU down there in Jeff City. I think you'll be looking for a bigger school. You're looking for more amenities. That place will be substantially better for you. And I've done that. I'm at college fairs and a student's like, oh, I'm looking for this communications degree program. I'm looking to be in a great bank. Do that. So I think we have to do more of that and support each other to ensure those things.
On a personal note, I failed to ask this earlier, but how do you balance? How do you wear all these hats as a father, as a husband, as a president of a university, as an advocate for students, for faculty, alumni? You're bringing in money, you're recruiting. How do you balance? Can you give like 1 or 2 tips on how do you balance?
Right. That's a great question. Let me say first, I'm blessed to have a strong team around me. I have a good team that works their tail off. That's one. Secondly, I'm more abundantly blessed to have a spouse, a wife that's so supportive, who believes in the work that I do, who's truly a helpmate, within that, who's able to, understand and sacrifice her own personal career sometime to ensure that, I'm able to do that. And I'm working on having a understanding daughter, because that's where the challenge happens, where she, dad is gone a lot. And the question is, why? And so, and to be completely honest, that's an area when I talk about having that support mechanism and support cast there, that's an area I struggle with. I recently did my evaluation with my board, and I was clear with them. That's something I struggle. I don't do a good job of balance. That's what I tell my team: do as I say, not as I do. As it relates to this, because I'm, and it's in full confession, I'm a workaholic. And so I think it's like one of my staff members said this morning, I sent an email. And it was, 3:43 in the morning. And they're like, why you send an email at 3:43? And so I had to catch myself, because they're like, we feel like that we have to be up, that early, or have to be at work late. And so I'm trying to learn a better sense of balance, because I haven't done a good job at that.
And on that note, the last question of the future round is, when it's all said and done, how would you like to be remembered personally?
Wow, great question. I think it's, everything I do, it's less about me, more about others, and so I want to be, if I can be remembered for anything, is that I was a servant leader that was unwilling and unapologetic about my faith, and unwilling to compromise my character and my integrity, and so, and created and became a voice for the unvoiced, and allowed people to have access and opportunities that historically may not had access and opportunities, if otherwise didn't provide that opportunity for them. I am when I say true essence of a transformational servant leader, I am. People say it all the time. It's just not about me, man. And where my glory happens is when I see, a student walk across the stage. When I see a student that I had a conversation with 15 minutes ago about, not in a degrading way. His pants are down, and I whisper in his ear and tell him something. Then I see him 15 minutes later, and he see me immediately without me having to have a conversation. Those pants are pulled up, and so it's just really helping people be the best that they can possibly be.
Oh man, that's powerful. That's powerful. So our last rapid fire round is called the culture change round. In this round, we ask 5 questions, rapid fire, give me rapid answers, and then we close it out. You ready, man?
I think so.
What is the best piece of advice that you've ever received?
Ensuring that your character and integrity leads the work that you do.
Great. What is one of your personal habits that you can attribute to your success?
I think it's not allowing anyone to outwork me. It's for me. I believe in working extremely hard, and being the first one in and the last one out.
What is your favorite book and why?
I think, I guess as of late, my favorite book, which is where I'm doing a lot around leadership and leadership development. And so Jim Collins' From Good to Great. It's been one that, lately that I've spent a significant amount of time on. I've read about 3 times, and I use it as a reference to, as I think about leadership and transformation and going to the next level, and keeping people encouraged to understand. So maybe you may not be the best leader in this seat, but how do I put you in the right seat to be the best leader? Because I believe in finding the best in people. So Jim Collins' From Good to Great has been probably one of my favorite books at this point.
That's a great book. And what inspires you the most and keeps you motivated?
Seeing students be successful, but I'll say that from a work perspective. But right now is that my wife and my daughter, my 4-year-old daughter is my inspiration. Being able to wake up every morning to see her growth, to see her development, keeps me motivated to strive to stay hungry. Like my boy Biggie said, do it like it's just live every day like it's the first day, And so, and I'm a product of hip hop, so I think that's what is important for me when I say inspiration. Jay-Z, the great philosopher by the name of Jay-Z, once said, "Men lie, women lie, but numbers don't." And so how to ensure that those performance measures that people can say whatever they want to say about Dwaun Warmack, but the work speaks for itself.
And with the numbers, you can be as authentic as you want, as long as those numbers are trending and you changing the culture like you are. So our last question is, if you were the president of the United States, what is the first thing you would do?
Oh man, I wouldn't want that drama. I would not want that drama. That's a great question, man. I think I can't even think to that level, man. That's not a headache that I would want to bestow on myself at all, man. I think it's, this is an interesting time in our country right now where race relations, I think, probably are at an all-time low, and how do we find a way, if there's a way, to unify, people around such a sensitive, unpopular topic and a fearful topic of around race. And I think if we get past that or through that, then we can talk about all these other things. But right now, it's race relations in this country is real.
Yeah, that's real. I don't know if there's any think tank, any advisory group or anything that can really solve that outside of doing like what you're doing, is taking it upon yourself and living life in accordance in a way that you want the world to be lived in and letting it kind of transcend through you. So that closes up that round. And I always end the show with a question about the culture and the show. And the last question we always end is, if you could change one thing about society, most specifically the African American culture, what would it be and why?
Again, for me, is that I would change. I just not even really change, inspire us to know our worth. And I think when I say that, we are amazing. We are an amazing group of people, entrepreneurs. We've survived a ton of things, from slavery to post-slavery to Jim Crow to today, right? And so, but how do we begin to channel our energy and be unified enough as a community to support each other? So with $1 trillion spending power, how do we begin to let that dollar circulate in our community? How do we begin to teach entrepreneurship to everyone that we encounter? I think it's, for so long in our community, we've said, oh, go to college, get a job, work for someone, retire 30 years. Well, I think that's the time of the old. How do we build entrepreneurs in every aspect of what they do? So that's what I tell every one of my students. I don't care if you're a criminal justice major. I don't care if you're a philosophy major. Whatever that is, we infuse an entrepreneurship within that context. So how do you own your own? I think what we don't do a good job of that, is, as we historically did, was have that in our African American community. So how do we come back more unified and understand that? So I was sharing with some of the young brothers, and I'll end with this. And he asked about going back to Detroit, and so my conversation was a real conversation. I'm talking to young brothers who I know, I don't know, but whoever could be out there trapping. And so I said, man, brother, you're brilliant, man. Look, I mean, you're brilliant in the sense that if your ability to be able to you're an entrepreneur, and running a successful business. Imagine if you channeled that energy in a different way. those thousands can be millions. And those, but understand and being able to see it from that lens and from that context, to be able to do that. So if we can be unified together, support each other, and invest in our communities, I think that will be game changing. Now, how do we get there? I have no clue.
But I think you're onto something over there at Harris-Stowe State University. So on behalf of myself and Minority Trailblazer Nation, I would like to thank you for giving us over an hour of your time, sharing about your past, the present, the future, and all that great stuff. I mean, I'm always motivated, but I'm that much more motivated about your journey and what the current works that you're doing for the culture, and most importantly, your team and your staff is as well. So I'd like to say thank you for coming on the show.
And sometimes the mainstream media don't want that to be seen. Being a voice and a platform to provide an opportunity for us to share the great things that are happening in our African-American minority community.
Amen, amen, amen. So where can Minority Trailblazer Nation go to find out more about Harris-Stowe State University and more about you?
Okay, Harris-Stowe, you can go to www.hssu.edu. And for me, you can find me on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Instagram and Twitter are HSSU Prez, Prez. HSSU Prez. That's Instagram and Twitter.
So Minority Trailblazer Nation, as we always do it, we're going to end the show like this. I almost forgot. If you enjoyed this show, if you want more of the Minority Trailblazer podcast, check us out at GregoryHill.com/MT podcast. Also, you can follow us online. Instagram at Gregory Hill, Twitter at Gregory Hill, Facebook Gregory E. Hill, Snapchat Gregory E. Hill. So we keep up to date on all the latest and the greatest. And make sure before you click out and go do what you need to do, leave a review. Remember, I'm giving 5 free copies of my book to anybody that emails me a review. Greg at GregoryHill.com. All right, that's all I got. So as I depart, I need you to do one thing and one thing only. What is that, Mr. Hill? That thing is change the freaking culture. Good night.